welcome back to my channel, and today we'll be talking about the show The Game, and this is basically a season 2 breakdown, and I'm just gonna give my opinion of what I thought about season 2. So watching season 2, I honestly really, what I enjoyed about it is, like, it just did, like, very well in my opinion, and I feel like they had a lot of consistency in the episode, and it just felt like, you know, you could just feel the timelines coming together perfectly, and you could feel like the consistency, especially with the characters and the storylines and all the stuff that was happening. The first thing we'll talk about is Brandon's drug problem. So basically in the show, what happens is Brandon ends up like being like a druggie, and he's basically like fresh out of rehab, and he ends up like having to stay with like the parents, not parents, Kelly and the husband, for a little bit, and he's like, he's trying to get clean and all that stuff, and he isn't doing anything, and he's actually like being honest about it. And Jason doesn't like want him staying here because of like their daughter and stuff, which honestly I understand, because you don't want somebody who's like known for doing drugs around your child, because that's not very healthy for your daughter. And then there's Kelly, who wants him to stay because she's like sees the good in him and all that stuff, so that basically happens. And so basically he ends up staying, and he's like, trying his best not to do drugs, and he's not doing any, and they're and he's actually telling the truth about like what he was doing and all that stuff, because he basically ends up telling him like, Jason's basically like watching him and all that stuff, and then he's like, oh, you're at the corner with druggies, but I actually found out that they weren't actually druggies, they were actually like male prostitutes trying to sell him sex and all that stuff, and that was happening and everything. And then after that, we later found out in the episode that Jason was the one who was doing steroids and all that drugs, and Brandon was actually trying to protect him and everything. And he ends up taking like the fall for Jason, and Brandon ends up getting like kicked out, and he ends up like lying about it to her. What I kind of thought would have been interesting is like if Brandon would have like him back, and they could have shown like a new, improved him. And I feel like he kind of would have been like a funny, consistent character, and I thought he probably would have had like people laughing and all that stuff. The next thing we talk about in the show is Derwin's cheating. One thing I never liked about the show was how like they tried to make Derwin the victim, and be like try to blame Melanie for all that stuff, and it's like all Melanie wanted to do was to study and to have her head in the game so she could have something for herself and make a name out of herself and all that, so she would have money whenever she needed to have the money for, and just so she could feel secure in herself and all that stuff. And then Darren ends up like, ends up cheating on her and all that stuff, and it's like what Darren needed to do was to have boundaries with himself and with Drew and all that stuff, because he did not have any boundaries at all. Like, he would literally be calling Melanie and all that stuff, and communicating to Melanie about like wanting getting married, and then and all that stuff, and she wouldn't want to, and he would literally keep Drew on the side. I remember like the first time he would like literally kissed her, and then after that, the second time he like slept with her, and then he literally goes to what do you call it, Melanie, and then just tells Melanie about the kiss, but doesn't tell her that he slept with her. And then after that, tries to like lie about it to her, and she deep down knows, because she has like woman's intuition and all that stuff. She feels it, and she's like, I know you're lying and all that stuff, and you're just denying it, and then it ends up like blowing up in his face and all that stuff. And then he's like talking to Dion about it, and then Dion is like, this isn't gonna go well, it's gonna blow up in your face, and he's like, no it's not, it's gonna be fine. And then after that, Dion basically was like talking to him and all that stuff, and she's like gonna expose him and all that stuff. She literally does. And then after that, sorry, and then after that, Melanie finds out, and they have this whole argument. She slaps him, well deserved. Like, I'm a person of, I basically believe of keeping my hands to myself. Honestly, he deserved to be like, how dare you cheat on me, and then you blame me, and then you play the victim, and you can't even do, like, my God, that relationship was bound to fail, because honestly, the lack of boundaries and communication that they had was just horrible. But I feel like it was more like the equal boundaries and lack of communication that they had with each other, especially on Darwin's part, because on Melanie's part, she did try to communicate with him. And I'm not gonna lie, Darren did try to communicate with her. But when it came down to boundaries, that was more of an issue because when it came down to getting rid of Trey and all that stuff, she did try to get rid of Trey, even though he was just a friend. But when it came down to Dermot, he never got rid of her. He would lie about it. He would play the victim, and then he would act dumb, and then he would get found out about it, and then he would play the victim and all that stuff. And it wasn't until when everything was going to shit that Derwin would be like, "Oh, I want you back," and all that stuff, and would play the role of being a decent boyfriend. And it wasn't until the ground was getting rough that he would do those things, which is actually terrible and just what I really did not enjoy. And then there was like Dion. I actually enjoyed Dion's character, but then she started to turn me off when she slept with um Jeremy. Jeremy? I don't know how to pronounce it, Jeremy. I really did not like that, and I was like, that's just messed up. Because personally, if I had known my friend had an ex, I would not have any relationship with them because at the end of the day, you don't know what's happening between them. You don't know if they're getting back together. You don't know if they're getting, it's just an awkward situation, and then just having to explain that to your friend, which to me isn't a real friend because if I know my friend has an ex, I'm not doing that because it's just, to me, it's just wrong. And then you have Kelly and Jason's relationship. I personally believe that they're perfect for each other because they basically wanted the same thing, Kelly wanted to be with a man that was rich and had money, and Jason literally admitted that he wanted to be with Kelly because she was like low maintenance and she didn't want much and she would accept him for who he was because there were other women that he was with and they were high maintenance as he said and he didn't want to be with them but only with Kelly because she accepted him for who he is and how he acts and all that stuff. And and then after that, what irks me about it was like, yes, Kelly wanted him for his money and all that stuff, but the fact that he lied about why he was with Kelly for the whole thing of everything, and then tried to play the victim was very annoying because it's like, so you really expect a girl to be with you, and out of your personality and your charm, like no, I personally believe that if a woman's with a man, she should be with him, especially for me. Because she's getting something out of it. Like, she's getting her nails paid for, her hair paid for, her bills paid for, her dates paid for, she's being asked on a date, he's proposing, all that stuff. Like, I'm a firm believer I'm not going to be in a relationship and, those things aren't being paid for. Like, I'm not doing it because it's like, there's, like, no point. There's no point. Like, no, there's no point. Because it's like, how is this benefiting me anyway? Like, and yes, there should be love, but there will also be love in that relationship. But it's like, it's just not attractive to me. Like, broke men aren't attractive to me. So I understand where Kelly's coming from. And also at the same time, Kelly was a housewife, but she did end up like getting a job, making her own money, and then he got mad at her for like making like mad money or whatever, keeping like money for when things would happen and all that stuff. And she basically ends up like making a collage and giving back all the money and all that stuff. And then he ends up like basically giving like a I'm sorry half-ass apology about their relationship, trying to fix it, which going to a therapy that he didn't even want to go to in the first place. So that's another layer into the relationship. And on other words, they deserve each other. They have a rock relationship, but I couldn't see them with anybody else but each other, and they deserve each other. And then there's Tasha Mack and Rick Fox. I actually like this dynamic because it makes sense and it works because honestly, I don't see her with anybody else but Rick Fox because I feel like Rick Fox is the only man that can truly like contain Tasha and can like truly hold her and all that stuff because she is a character who's like, he's the calm and collected and she's the fiery, she is the sassy, she is she is that and he's he, and they just blend so good and well for each other, and they just like make such a good relationship, and I really enjoyed their relationship. And then there was like Coach T and Tasha. I did not like them because it was like her hiding out and all that stuff. And it just would have never worked out because they would have never gotten together. And they were just constant arguing because she didn't want to tell Malik because he was her, like, he was the captain. Not captain, he was a coach for her, like, the Suns team. And it just wasn't going anywhere, basically. But I could see, Tasha and Rick Fox ending up together, and it just makes more sense. Like, they're way more compatible in every way. And then there's Malik and Melanie. I really love their relationship because they just give me like best friends, sister and brother energy. And I just loved it because it was just so cute. And then there was Janae and Derwin. I actually like Janae and Derwin because to me, they just fit each other more. And I just feel like they're more mature for each other and better for each other. How they would like talk out certain things and stuff. Like, instead of like him yelling at Melanie like he usually does, he talks out things with Janae and all that stuff. There's like a scene where, she's like interpreting like his anger and everything because, he's like questioning her, like, oh, how many guys have you been with and all that stuff. And she's like, I've been with Lamar, I've been with who, and this and this. And then, and then they end up like talking out, and he's like, oh, I'm just been down this road before or whatever. And then he's like, I'm just like intimidated when my girlfriend is hanging out with like all these top-notch guys and all that stuff. And it's like, and then she's like, oh, you shouldn't have like called me a hoe and all that stuff. And then he was like, oh, I'm not calling you a hoe and stuff, I never said that. But it's like, you're implying it, and it's like, you don't say those things, you just talk it out to your girlfriend, and that's how you get solutions. You need solutions, not problems. And that's what I agree with. It's like, it doesn't matter how many guys but she's been before you. All that matters is that you're together now, because that's none of your business. On top of that, it gave her experience, like, what she wanted and what she didn't want. So that's none of your business, basically. Like, stay out of women's business. And then there's Tasha's harassment. Honestly, with this episode, I did not like how it was written, in my opinion, because it was wrong for him to just whip out his penis like nothing happened. But I'm not gonna lie, it was also wrong for Tasha to use those racial stereotypes against him, because that's not right either. But I just did not enjoy the whole episode, and she was like, oh, my daddy was a man, but I did stand for the whole respect me, don't talk over me, and don't belittle me part, and the whole inclusion of everybody. One thing I hated was that they let her give that speech just so they can fire her. But that's a spoiler alert. But I'm all for the whole, don't belittle me, don't respect me, don't eat my food, ask first, and all that stuff. And treat me like a normal human being. Treat me like a team player. Not team player, but, treat me as like, how do I say it now? Treat me like a human being, basically. Don't treat me like shit, Sorry, my throat. Jesus, my throat. And then there's Kelly's drinking. One thing I never understood was, like, I hated how they always made jokes about it. They never addressed it, because I feel like the way Kelly used to drink as a character, I just feel like she would have gotten sick or something would have happened. Or she probably would have done something. Because drinking all that much alcohol is not good. And then there's Robin and Malik. I actually like Robin and Malik's character because they just made sense to me. And when they came together and everything, they just were like very compatible, and their comparisons just worked for each other. And I just enjoyed seeing them together, because I feel like if the show had like better writing, they would have ended up together, because they make the most sense to me. I just couldn't see him with anybody else. I feel like either her or the other model that she was with before would have made sense for Malik to get together. But I wouldn't want him to be with the first model, because like he treated her horribly and she doesn't deserve that. But I just feel like him, Robin are like more compatible together. But at the same time, Robin deserves somebody better, because she shouldn't have to be pulling teeth for that to work out. Also, with the whole Tasha thing, like I said, I just felt like they just needed to treat her like another employee, you know? Not to like do those nasty, lewd, and crude things, because yes, that stereotyping and those things that she said were very hurtful and very rude and not nice, but them whipping out his big penis like that was not, you know, appropriate and was very disgusting, and definitely should have been grounds for like harassment and stuff like that. I'm very glad that he was, fired and stuff like that, but it just doesn't teach him a lesson if they brought him back and stuff like that. And they did not have like a right to like look at her or talk to her about like that, because like yes, things like that happen, but but the only reason you should be worried is if you act in that way, and if you harass women. If you don't harass women, if you don't, yeah. So as I was saying, like honestly, like I was saying, like he shouldn't have done that. He should not have whipped out his thing, and he should not have made those jokes, because those were insensitive, those were racist, and those were wrong. And I agree, he shouldn't have gotten his job back at all, especially that quick. Like, he shouldn't have gotten his job back like that, because that was harassment, that was wrong, period. They shouldn't have, like, talked to her like that at all, or, like, or just, like, stop talking to her because that's your choice, because at the end of the day, you only have to worry if you are a harasser, especially to women, and if you are, like, out here making women feel uncomfortable because they're women, or making sexual jokes to women because they're women, or because, women are gonna get, how do I say it? Like, no, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, if you know that you are somebody and you make jokes to harass them because they're a woman and all that stuff, you should not be doing that. And you should only be worried if you're doing those things, because it's going to land your trouble, because you're doing wrong, and that's just wrong, And you should only be worried if you do those things, because you shouldn't be doing those things. That's not good. So, him getting fired was just, and they should have never brought him back. And the whole thing of her getting fired, like 6 months later, because that's what they're putting through, just made no sense, because she was such a good manager, at least in my opinion. And now it's Janae's pregnancy. So basically, by the end of season 2, Janae is pregnant, and what happens is that Darren basically got drunk, wants Melanie back and all that stuff, and isn't answering Janae's phone and all that stuff. I'm gonna guess they got into an argument or something, and Darren, being Darren, decided that he wanted to be a half-ass and just like ignore his pregnant girlfriend, because he like didn't know or whatever, and he like, how do I say, like, he was just like mad and didn't care or whatever. And then he's basically like pregnant. She's basically pregnant, and they're figuring out. And then there's Melanie, who's trying to draw her way back into this relationship. And it was in fact just because they did sleep together. Because there's an episode that literally shows that, and because she literally took a test. And so now she's trying to decide on how she's gonna deal with that. Personally, if I was her, I would move on with my life and just head out the door, because honestly, looking back at it, I don't know why, but when I was younger, I used to ship them a lot, and I was like, oh, their relationship is so cute. But then after I realized and rewatched as a teenager, I'm like, why would you want to be with somebody who puts you through so much and is like pulling you through the rug, when she already knows that if she were to have done the same stuff to Derwin that he was doing to her, he would have left her, because there was literally this whole Trey Wicks episode, like, her and Trey didn't even do anything together at this point, and it was only until like the episode where he cheated on her and she needed, reinsurance and everything to make herself feel loved, that they did sleep together and all that stuff, and he got mad at her for that, as if he wasn't cheating on her, which is hypocritical. But as I was saying, so as I was saying and all that stuff, during the Trey Wicks episode, he literally stopped talking to her. Character literally stopped talking to her. Character literally at a time just literally gave her the whole silent treatment and did not talk to her. And I was like, versus when she did all of that stuff, versus when he did all of that stuff to her, she literally gave him so much grace, so much forgiveness, and literally went back to him after all of that he did, and all he did to embarrass her and all that stuff. And yes, it took time for that to happen, but it still happened. What should have happened was that she should have moved on and she should have left and she should have moved somewhere else. And I feel like if she did have to end up with somebody and she didn't end up alone, she should have been with Jeremy, because out of all the men that she dated on that show, he was one of the ones that actually treated her with decency, respect, and literally did not cheat on her. And she ended up cheating on him, which is the irony of the show. And it goes to show how horrible of a character Darren is and how horrible of a relationship they were in. It was just toxic. And I just did not appreciate that, especially Durham's character. He was such a hypocrite and a cheater and a liar and a victim blamer and a victim player. And it's like, how dare you get mad at her for doing what she when she like lied about like her sleeping with what's his face, Malik, and he got mad. Like, you literally cheated on her. You have no right to be upset. Or like when he found out that Trey was paying for her school, he made the insinuation of, oh, he's only paying because she slept with him and all that stuff. And it's like, he could have been paying because they were good friends, which did happen in the beginning, but then because she needed to feel loved and reassured, they ended up sleeping together. And then that was like, oh, she's only paying because you slept with him, which is very disrespectful. Which literally gives the nation that men and women cannot be friends. And personally, I disagree with that, because I have male friends that I am just friends with and I don't see in a romantic way. And I just did not like that about Duran's character. Like, he was so much things, and I just did not like Duran's character. I hated Melanie during the relationship, and I hated the fact that they ended up married and ended up pregnant in the show, and it was just wrong. And that's basically my season 2 breakdown of the game. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe.